Good morning. Bon matin, tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here.
We are here today for the 122nd meeting of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Today we are joined by Minister Leblanc as well as Madame Drouin to begin our study on documents requested by the Commissioner of the Public Inquiry into Foreign Interference. Colleagues, we will begin as we normally do with just a reminder that the official headsets have been provided for the health, safety, and well-being of our interpreters. Please make sure that you place them on the stickers to the right or left of you when not in use. So we are joined today, as I mentioned, by the Honourable Dominic Leblanc, the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs, as well as from the Privy Council Office, Madame Nathalie Drouin, the Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister. Mr. Leblanc, we will turn the floor over to you, sir, and you have up to 10 minutes for opening remarks, following which we will go into our line of questioning. Minister, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair and colleagues, thank you. Thank you for inviting me and my colleague, Madame Drouin, to speak to you about the important work of the Hug Commission. And Mr. Chair, a particular thank you to you. I lived in like a real moment of panic yesterday that you might cancel this meeting this morning. Natalie and I would have been devastated had you chosen to do so. So we really appreciate the efforts you made, Mr. Chair and colleagues, to not go home after 5 weeks of sitting, but to stay here to have this opportunity. So I know it means the world to Natalie and me, and I just wanted all of you to know that. So thank you. Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement a récemment déposé le projet de loi.
Chair, the government recently tabled Bill C-65, which will strengthen the Canada Elections Act, and also Bill C-70. I've just had a discussion on that with our colleagues, talking about the importance of this bill, and thank you to the House and our colleagues in the Senate who have adopted this bill. Bill C-70, as you know very well, will increase the government's ability and also of our security and intelligence services to detect and disrupt foreign interference threats. And obviously, it will serve to protect the Canadian population. As these measures demonstrate, the government is constantly improving the protection of Canada's democracy provisions as well as our democratic institutions here in Canada. With this in mind, the Government of Canada has taken significant steps to also support the Commission chaired by Justice Ugg. This demonstrates the seriousness of our commitment to fight against foreign interference. Last year, I worked with my colleagues from all recognised parties in the House of Commons in order together to develop the terms of reference for the Commission on foreign interference. Back then, Madame Drouin was the Deputy Clerk, and she worked with me as Deputy Minister of Justice, as you know very well, so we were able to enjoy her support and advice as a senior official within the Privy Council office, and that helped us a great deal, and also helped the parliamentary House leaders from other parties as well, so I wanted to underline her important role last summer in all of this process. We also worked together to secure the appointment of the Honourable Justice Marie-Josée Ugg as Commissioner. I'm proud of the work that we've accomplished together on a non-partisan basis.
In terms of the terms of reference that set up the Hug Commission, was that a special exemption would be made to release certain cabinet confidences, specifically the same set of documents that were provided to the Independent Special Rapporteur on Foreign Interference. These documents, cabinet documents, were provided early on to the Commission as part of its initial phase of work. And these documents, of course, were also shared with the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, as well as the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency. In addition to those documents outlined in the terms of reference specifically, the Government of Canada has provided over 46,000 documents to the Commission and is processing thousands of more documents as we speak. The majority of these documents, as you can imagine, are highly classified. To be clear, some of the most sensitive and top-secret documents in the Government of Canada's possession. The Government of Canada committed to ensuring the Commission has access to all the material it requires to fulfill its mandate, and we continue to work with the Commission collaboratively to this effect. Between the tens of thousands of documents and the dozens of government witnesses who have appeared before the Commission, both in private in-camera hearings and in public sessions, I am confident that this remains the case. J'attends avec impatience le rapport.
I look forward to the Commission's final report and the Commission's recommendations, which, as you know, it will be delivered before the 31st of December 2024, this year, therefore. I would like to note that Commissioner Ogg has agreed to examine the allegations concerning members of Parliament mentioned in the recent report of the Committee of Parliamentarians on National Security and Intelligence. The Commissioner's report, I'm quite convinced, will help to strengthen Canada's democracy, democratic institutions, and electoral processes within Canada. And I refer to processes in the plural because, as you know, I hope that the recommendations will also feed into the thinking of our colleagues in provinces, territories, and possibly also at the municipal level as well.
Chair will continue to support the important work of Justice Hogg and her team. They're beginning again a series of interviews with senior government witnesses. So I'll have the privilege of being back in Ottawa in the coming weeks again to meet with the lawyers of the Hogg Commission. Their work is very much on track and continuing. We'll continue, as I said, in a collaborative way, and Madame Drouin spoke to me a few minutes ago in terms of the ongoing dialogue that exists between senior officials of the Privy Council Office who would be responsible for the management of cabinet documents and such, that there is an ongoing active conversation between the Commission, the Commission's lawyers, and the Privy Council Office. So this work will continue, and we very much believe it will result in the Commission having exactly the information it needs to do this work. And I look forward to the discussion, Mr. Chair, and the questions from colleagues. And once again, let me thank you profoundly for scheduling this morning's meeting. It means the world to Madame Drouin and me that we're able to be here with you. So thank you again for that, Mr. Chair.
Minister, my pleasure to have you here. Thank you for making the time in your schedule. Mr. Cooper, the floor will be yours for 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister LeBlanc, the Globe and Mail reported on May 23rd that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are withholding an undisclosed number of documents from Madam Justice Hogg, the Commissioner of the Inquiry on Foreign Interference, and the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, has confirmed that the documents turned over to her, that nearly 10% of those have been redacted. I underscore the documents that are being withheld are documents that Madam Justice Hogg has requested to fulfill her mandate. So what is the Prime Minister hiding from Madam Justice Hogg?
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Cooper, thank you for the question. The Prime Minister and the government are hiding nothing from the Hogg Commission. The redactions you referred to, and again, if colleagues want technical explanations, Madame Drouin, I'm sure can provide them, but my understanding is those redactions relate to solicitor-client privilege or cabinet confidence, and that is a fundamental principle of our Westminster parliamentary system. But in no way is the government working at counter purposes to the Commission. As I said, there is an active, ongoing conversation on exactly those documents that Mr. Cooper referred to.
Well, and through you, Mr. Chair, Minister, with respect to that active, ongoing conversation, the reason there's a conversation is because the government is obstructing the work of Madam Justice Hogg. The government is not turning over documents that she sees as relevant to fulfilling her mandate. And I would note that this committee received a letter from counsel to the Commissioner that indicated that with regards to the turning over of documents that Madam Justice Hogg has requested, quote, the interest of the Commission and the interest of the committee would appear to align. So again, I repeat, what is the Prime Minister hiding? And I'll further ask, would you provide the assurance that at the end of these discussions, Madam Justice Hogue will receive every document that she has requested on an unredacted basis?
So, Mr. Chair, our colleague repeated his question. I'll repeat the answer. The government and the Prime Minister are obviously hiding absolutely nothing. We happily set up the commission with the work and the support of recognized political parties. Mr. Cooper's House Leader, who's a friend of mine, Andrew Scheer, and I worked. And in fact, the terms of reference that were accepted by every party represented at this table contemplated the release of the cabinet documents the commission has, and also contemplated the protection of cabinet confidence and solicitor-client privilege. So none of this is a surprise.
Minister, I would submit that it is unacceptable for the Prime Minister to pick and choose which documents Madam Justice Hogue can see. Part of Madam Justice Hogue's mandate is to examine decisions made by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet in respect of foreign interference and what the Prime Minister did or failed to do. And in that regard, I would submit the Prime Minister is in a conflict. Again, if he has nothing to hide, then turn over the documents.
So again, our colleague repeats the same question for
I pointed out a clear conflict on the part of the Prime Minister, insofar as a major part of the mandate of Madam Justice Hogue is to examine what the Prime Minister did or failed to do.
So it won't surprise you that characterizing that as a clear conflict is not a submission that I would respect. I think it's interesting, Mr. Chair, there have been 44 federal commissions of inquiry since 1977. Only 5 of them have had access to cabinet confidence. 4 of them were under Liberal governments, actually headed by prime ministers called Trudeau. And the fifth one involved a decision.
Minister,
Mr. Chair, I was answering the question.
Mr. Cooper, I'm going to stop the clock so as to allow you an opportunity to have one more question, but we have invited the minister here to answer questions. I'm going to provide him the opportunity to finish. I'd ask you let him finish that answer in respect to your question, and then I'll start the clock. I'll start the clock again, okay? But let's let him finish the question, or the answer, rather.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. So, as I said, 4 commissions headed by Liberal governments where the Prime Minister was called Trudeau. The 5th one, these are 5 of 44 that have had access to cabinet confidence. So it tells you it's a very unusual process. And the 5th one was a decision made by the late Brian Mulroney with respect to cabinet confidence in the Oliphant inquiry. So again, Mr. Chair, what's important is that the opposition parties agreed to those terms of reference, and of course now they're manufacturing a lot of indignation with respect to this issue.
Well,
okay, thanks. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Cooper, just so I'm clear, I'm going to restart the clock now, okay? Go ahead, sir.
Well, in fact, the Prime Minister isn't just hiding documents from Madam Justice Hogue. The annual report of NSICOP, released on June 5th, states that the Prime Minister and the government withheld over 1,000 documents from NSICOP and that it is, quote, inappropriately using claims of cabinet confidences to avoid disclosing information. Isn't that exactly what is happening here? And I will repeat again, and it's a very simple yes or no question. Will the Prime Minister turn over every document that Madam Justice Hogue has requested whenever these discussions come to an end?
So, Mr. Chair, our colleague...
Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, our colleague raised NSICOP, or the National Security Intelligence Review Agency. It's Parliament itself in the legislation that protected cabinet confidence when those bodies were created. Neither of the acts that created those bodies created exceptions in terms of access to cabinet confidence. Exceptionally, the Prime Minister has authorized the disclosure of cabinet documents to those bodies. And so, Mr. Chair, I can tell our colleague that at the end of the process that is ongoing and is collaborative, and I hope that somebody will ask Madame Drouin, who has insight into those ongoing conversations with the Commission. It would be inappropriate for me, and it's not politicians that decide what documents to react or no.
The answer appears to be no, since the Minister has refused, I think, at least 3 times to answer that question. And it's clear that the Prime Minister is conveniently withholding documents from Madam Justice Hoke because he does not want her to be able to fully scrutinize his failures to protect our sovereignty and democracy from Beijing's interference.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Minister.
Just because Mr. Cooper
Sure.
keeps asserting the same thing does not make it true.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Madame Fortier, à vous pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here, accompanied by Ms. Nathalie Drouin. It's a real pleasure to see you here today. Obviously, Canadians have lots of questions currently, and perhaps it would be good to recall to Canadians, perhaps for people here around the table, when we refer to a confidential or secret document, how do we actually determine what we're going to share or not? And how have we decided, together with Commissioner Ogg, which documents would actually be shared? Could you first determine that for us, please? Mr. Chair, through you, I'd like to respond to Ms. Fortier and say thank you for that question. I'll turn to Ms. Drouin because she's got a great deal of expertise when it comes to the details of your question. But first of all, I'd like to say the following. It's important to point out that at no point in time has the government invoked cabinet confidences to actually withhold documents from the Commission that related to foreign interference incidents. That's very important. Ms. Drouin really pointed that out to me. In the discussion on a friendly basis with the Commission, it is very important that people understand that if there were points in time where the Cabinet was informed about incidents or proposals to counter foreign interference, these documents have already been shared. These Cabinet documents have already been shared with the Commission. But to come back to this question of the criteria that are used to assess this, perhaps Ms. Drouin is in a better position to answer that question. Thank you very much. First of all, the first reference framework is in fact the terms of reference that were granted to the Commission. So it's all about the relevance of the vis-à-vis the terms of reference that we assess this. And the Commission itself does make requests for information. Unfortunately, with all the context and the leaks in the press, that meant that the Commission has had to be very specific in terms of the documents that it wished to obtain. And to go into details about these elements that were referred to by the Minister and the discussions that are ongoing with the Commission. When the time comes to deal with Cabinet confidences, the Commission, of course, understands the importance for the rule of law here to protect Cabinet confidences for reasons of solidarity between ministers and to allow the ministers to freely express their opinions during discussions within Cabinet. But at the same time, the Commission wants to be certain that it has all the elements it needs, in particular in terms of policies, so that it can come out with its recommendations and make sure that it doesn't come out with a recommendation that, for example, may already have been considered by the Cabinet, but for reason X or Y, it hadn't already been raised. So when we work with the Commission, we don't just say, no, you won't have access to this. There's always a discussion about the various components. And of course, we give a particular context to the Commission as well. Now, I'd like to interject, Mr. Chair. Natalie will correct me if I'm mistaken, but these discussions, as you've seen, they are conducted by senior officials within the Privy Council. It's not discussions that are held by political assistants or MPs. No, it's officials within the Privy Council that have that responsibility and that entertain these discussions with the Commission and their representatives. I'm correct? Natalie? Yes. Ms. Fortier. During your introductory remarks or in one of your answers, you said that it's rare that we share as many documents for commissions and public inquiries. Could you continue to explain this a bit more? Why are we giving more here, or why are we participating more this time in particular compared to other inquiries? Why are you sharing documents in this way? Why have you established that in this way this time? Well, answer, as I said, There have been 44 commissions of public inquiry at a federal level since 1977, and there are only 5 where they received documents that were actually covered by cabinet confidences, and 4 out of the 5 were held under the Prime Minister called Trudeau. And the other one was the deceded Brian Mulroney, where when he was a Prime Minister, he'd authorised certain cabinet confidences to be handed over to the Oliphant Commission. So it's exceptional. There have been certain commissions of public inquiry that referred to national security in the past where they didn't receive these cabinet confidence documents. I think it's also important, Mr. Chair, to take note that this was included in the terms of reference. So this pretend surprise where now we're saying, oh, the government, as it's in its right to do so, is protecting cabinet confidences, or the Cabinet Council has been very much understood by parliamentary leaders within all of the recognised parties in the House of Commons, and they accepted that in the terms of reference. Now we're at the end of the parliamentary session. People want to really blow things out of proportion before the end of the session. I don't think it's really a surprise for anyone, really.
Okay. Merci, Madame Fortier.
Thank you very much, Madame Fortier. There were 15 seconds left, so we can give them back to you later. Good morning now to Madame Gaudreau. You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't think we would have been here today. We could have moved on to something else, but given the fact that, unfortunately, we had this golden opportunity to demonstrate the willingness for things to change. And I would dare to say that with these 70 meetings and so on, we've got the Commission of Public Inquiry that wants to do its job, and it's asking for specific documents. They know what they're looking for, and there's this no. So when we're minister and when this happens, what do we do? Mr. Chair. Through you to answer Madame Gaudreau, I'd like to say, yes, I feel that I'm very much at ease. I've been able to work with your parliamentary leader. I've got a great deal of esteem for him. Together, we developed the very specific terms of reference that said that there would be 4 documents from the Privy Council, 4 cabinet documents that we handed over to the Commission, and the parliamentary leaders accepted this. And when the Commission started its work, as Ms. Drouin explained, they had questions about other possible cabinet documents. And there's an active, ongoing collaborative discussion that takes place between the officials from the Privy Council, senior officials, and the Commission. So I feel very much at ease at the end of this parliamentary session. Well, what I can observe is that when we have goodwill, so that we want the Commission of Public Inquiry to do its work well, and everyone around the table is aware of the fact that I'm certainly not partisan the Bloc, and the Bloc wants to make sure that the Commission of Public Inquiry can't really succeed because it's got up until the 31st of December, but needs to be equipped with the right tools to do this. And we're talking about an inquiry here. We are here today to say, right, this is enough messing around. There's a job to be done. There's been an extra mandate that's been given. People are concerned and they've lost confidence in our democracy. Can we please correct the course now quickly? Answer. Madame Gaudreau, we're going to continue to work with the Commission. If you allow me to do so, I do agree that the Bloc Québécois in many of these discussions around foreign interference have avoided fall into extreme partisanship that we've seen demonstrated by other political formations. They weren't able to avoid that temptation. I'd like to congratulate the Bloc Québécois for the motion that was adopted last week. I was happy that the Commission has accepted the clear will of the House of Commons on this matter. And with all due respect and friendship for you, I don't think there's any messing around here. Quite the contrary, we're very much engaged in ensuring that the Commission has all the necessary documents and all the necessary witnesses for the Commission. Here we're focusing in on cabinet documents, which is quite correct, and the Commission wants us to do that, and we're doing it with pleasure. But the Commission has a great deal of access to witnesses the witnesses can expose questions of intelligence and foreign interference. If you allow me to point something else out, we have shared all of the highly classified documents that are related to foreign interference and foreign interference incidents, because according to us and according to government lawyers, these are the specific case examples that can be studied by the Commission. I understand, but nevertheless, how come that once again, Minister has to come out in media first? We look to the press and we say, oh, information is not sufficient, the Commission can't do its work, and it comes out in the press. If everything is going well and if there's constant improvements, then it shouldn't have come out. Is it the last time that we're going to have this splash in the media? Do we know that things are going to go really smoothly now up until the 31st December? I really want to have confirmation, because I have the feeling we're going to have something else creeping up and splashing across the Globe and Mail in another 2 months' time. Response: I very much agree with you that we want it to go tickety-boo right up until the 31st of December and go smoothly. I'm confident that we're going to succeed. Now, you'll understand you're a politician yourself, and you're very efficient when it comes to understanding political issues at stake. I'm not responsible for what happens with other colleagues, and I'm not talking about the Bloc Québécois. I can't control what other colleagues say to the Globe and Mail. If that's our assessment scale, then I fear that there are certain colleagues that will exaggerate and say things to other press members, or perhaps even turn to the Globe and Mail. Madame Gaudreau, something that's important, and Madame Drouin pointed this out to me just a few moments ago, namely, the Cabinet, the Council of Ministers, does not discuss specific incidents of foreign interference. And that's something, well, if there are other questions, perhaps Madame Drouin could give more details on that. It's important for people to understand that the Council Ministers, when they meet, they do not go into the details of an incident with country X that's tried to interfere in such and such a manner. Rather, these questions are dealt with various ministers with their various powers, but it's not the Cabinet as such. There is no Cabinet document that specifically deals with specific incidents or specific types of intelligence related to foreign interference incidents or alleged foreign interference incidents. But, Madam, if we're very fortunate, then perhaps Madame Drouin can give you an extraordinary exposition on this. Yes, it would be great to hear from her later. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Welcome to PROC. The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and for coming to the committee here today. Now, central to the mandate of the Foreign Interference Inquiry and for Commissioner Hogue is to find out who knew what when, and what did the government do about it. So when the inquiry was announced, after much deliberation and push from the NDP, finally we do have this inquiry, which is a good thing. Minister LeBlanc, you actually said in the media, and I quote, Justice Hogue will have full access to all relevant cabinet documents, as well as all other information she deems relevant for the purposes of her inquiry. The Commission is now asking for the unredacted cabinet documents in order to assist them with their work. So if the Commissioner is asking for this, if they did not feel that it was important for them to fulfill their mandate, they wouldn't ask for it. So would the Minister agree with that assessment?
Mr. Chair, through you to our colleague, Ms. Kwan, thank you for the question, and thank you for your participation in this important issue over the last number of months. I think Canadians have seen your personal implication in this, and it certainly, I think, speaks to your strength as a parliamentarian, so I just wanted to say that. Ms. Kwan, am comfortable with what I said in that particular media interview, that the Commission will have access to all of the relevant cabinet documents. As I indicated, when I worked with your House Leader, who I've known for a long time, Peter Julian, over the summer, we agreed on a specific list of cabinet documents that the Hague Commission received very early in their mandate. And now, as I said, there is an ongoing conversation between the lawyers of the Hague Commission and senior officials of the Privy Council office, as they have, as you noted, Ms. Kwan, come to us with requests for additional documents. Again, Madame Drouin would have specific examples. It's not only with respect to cabinet confidence. My understanding is the Hague Commission would come to the Privy Council office with respect to national security documents that might be in the possession of CSIS or other government agencies. So that is an ongoing conversation that's not only focused, obviously, on cabinet documents per se, but that is, as you noted, part of that conversation.
So I take that to mean to say yes, those are important documents that the Commission would require, whether it's cabinet documents or national security documents, all documents really, for her to fulfill her mandate. I appreciate that House leaders prior to this work come to some sort of agreement, but we have to note those House leaders, of course, is not doing this work. What we have to trust and we have to enable is for the Commission to fully investigate this matter, to restore trust and faith in the hearts and minds of Canadians. So in order for the Commission to properly do this work, then the government needs to facilitate that and to ensure that those documents to which they require that they could actually access. Now, there's ongoing discussion with respect to what other documents will or will not be released. We know about 10% of them is not being released at the moment. So can the minister advise the documents that the government is withholding, whether it's cabinet documents or otherwise, can the minister confirm that those documents would not assist or provide any insight to Commissioner Hogue in fulfilling her mandate of the inquiry?
Mr. Chair, it's a very good question, a precise question, and perhaps Madame Drouin, who would have a better line of sight on the process of which these documents are, could provide a precise answer to Ms. Kwan if it's acceptable.
So, as Minister LeBlanc said, we have already shared 4 MCs with the commissions. And
Madame Drouin, correct us. MC is a
memorandum to cabinet.
I tease this deputy ministers, Mr. Chair, often. They use acronyms. MC is a memorandum to cabinet.
So sorry. Thank you for this precision, Minister. And those cabinet documents were the most relevant, to the point, really addressing foreign interference. For example, the memorandum to cabinet regarding hostile actors. So we shared with the Commission in a very transparent way things that were relevant, to the point with them. Then the conversation is there other, like, accessory conversation that Cabinet may have been in the policy sphere? I need to, again, to precise that it's not about specific FI incident. No specific FI incident have been withheld to the Commission. So that, I think, I need to reassure parliamentarians.
Well, thank you for that. But what's important also is not just specific incidences. Of course, that is important. But to the whole question around what did the government do about foreign interference issues and concerns, it does go to the question of policy and not necessarily tied to a specific incident. And if those documents are withheld, how will the commissioner be able to determine what did the government do about it? Because those are precisely related to policy discussions. And shouldn't it be that it would be up to the commissioner to determine whether or not that information is relevant and important for her to fulfill her mandate and not for the government? Because if it was up to the government, we wouldn't actually be sitting here at the moment. We probably wouldn't even need the inquiry.
Ms. Kwan, we're over time, but I'm going to permit an answer.
Sure.
To
Just
your question.
so I agree with Ms. Kwan, Mr. Chair, in the sense that the cabinet documents that considered policy choices, legislative options, and so on around foreign interference were the 4 documents that were given to the cabinet. Those were the time where I and my predecessors went to cabinet with specific proposals around strengthening our democracy. So those documents were shared. I don't want to be technical with Ms. Kwan, but no government, and it's a fundamental principle of a Westminster parliamentary system, no government since Confederation is going to evacuate cabinet confidence to somebody other than the sitting head of the government. In the case, it's the Prime Minister personally, as it was when Mr. Mulroney waived cabinet confidence, and as it was when Pierre Elliott Trudeau did with respect to the MacDonald Commission in the 1970s, and as it is the case where the current Prime Minister did with respect to the Hague Commission. And that was well known. It was very clear in the terms of reference, Mr. Chair, that protecting solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence was well understood. Now the back-and-forth process will obviously allow the Hague Commission to do the important work that I agree with Ms. Kwan they need to do.
Thanks very much, Ms. Kwan. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, Minister, now that you've confirmed that a mere 4 cabinet documents have been turned over to Madam Justice Hogue, how many cabinet documents are being withheld from her?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the specific number. Those are decisions that perhaps Madame Drouin could elaborate on, but I also think it's a fundamental principle.
It was just a simple question. How many documents have been withheld? You can't answer that. I find it astounding that a mere 4 documents have been turned over to Madam Justice Hogue that Madame Drouin said were deemed to be the most relevant. Who determined those documents to be the most relevant? The Prime Minister, the PCO, Madam Justice Hogue? Who determined that?
I did with your House Leader, Mr. Cooper, last summer.
I don't think that that is accurate. And since that time, Madam Justice Hogue has requested additional documents that are being withheld by your government, documents that go to the heart, potentially, about what the Prime Minister did or didn't do about foreign interference. I'm going to ask you a different question, because we know that you have confirmed when I asked you, by refusing to answer, that the Prime Minister will not turn over all of the documents requested by Madam Justice Hogue. But on another matter of concern, when you appeared at the Public Safety Committee, I asked you twice if you could provide the assurance that no one serving in Justin Trudeau's cabinet is among the MPs named in the NSICOP report who wittingly collaborated with a hostile foreign state. Twice you refused to answer that question, so I'm going to ask you a third time. Can you provide that assurance?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper has asked that question a number of times in committee and in the House of Commons. My answer remains the same. I took note of what Deputy Commissioner Flynn of the RCMP said when he testified yesterday before a committee as well. Getting into precisions with respect to specific intelligence information, including the numbers of people that may be a source of comments in various intelligence documents, is not something that we're permitted to do. And again, Mr. Cooper can ask the same question, but he's going to get the same answer, Mr. Chair.
In fact, the Prime Minister saw the NSICOP report. The Prime Minister made the final determination with respect to the redactions. The Prime Minister blacklisted the names of those MPs. So I'll ask you this. Can you provide the assurance that once Madam Justice Hogue completes her work, that the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states will be made public?
Mr. Chair, just to correct again another falsehood that Mr. Cooper asserted, that the Prime Minister made those redactions in the NSICOP report, I would draw him to comments of Alex Ruff, who made it very clear before the committee that none of the redactions of the NSICOP report were made by any political person, by a political staffer, by a minister, and the idea that the Prime Minister has a black marker and spends his time redacting the NSICOP.
You know it,
Mr. Cooper knows, Mr. Cooper knows, Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper knows it's fake.
Hey. Okay. Just a minute here. First of all, the interpreters have a job to do. Second of all, there's no quality answer and no quality question that can be given or asked when we can't make out what's being said. I've stopped the clock. Minister, I'm going to give you the floor. If in about the next 15 seconds you can finish that response, Mr. Cooper, there's a minute 21 remaining. You'll have the opportunity to resume your line of questioning. Minister, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think it's important not to assert something in a preamble to a question that's completely inaccurate, that his colleague clarified, and then move on to another question. It doesn't do a service for the public understanding of this issue.
Thanks, Minister. I'm going to restart the clock. Minute 21, Mr. Cooper.
Minister, answer the question. Can you provide the assurance that once Madam Justice Hogue completes her work, that the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states, or any foreign state for that matter, wittingly and knowingly, will be made public?
Mr. Chair, I don't think that it would be appropriate for me to offer legal advice to a Court of Appeal justice on what would be her obligations in terms of a public report with respect to national security information. Again, if you assert the falsehood in the question and ask for an answer, it doesn't make the premise accurate.
So you can't provide that assurance. Can you at least provide the assurance, given that the Prime Minister knows the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states, including potentially MPs in the Liberal caucus, that none of those MPs will have their nomination papers signed by the Prime Minister to run in the next election? Will you provide that, at least that assurance?
Minister, we've got
if you're not going to be transparent in any other respect.
About 10 seconds to answer that, Mr.
Yeah, so I think it might be more constructive for Mr. Cooper's leader to accept the government's offer to receive the security clearance and see the unredacted report that Mr. Cooper seems to be happy to talk about, not having seen it. It might be more useful if his leader saw the report, and then he might be able to make those very judgments that Mr. Cooper referred to a second ago.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Gerritsen, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll bring that next time. Minister, thank you for being here. On June the 10th, Alex Ruff, who is a member of NSICOP, said, and I quote, "To build on what Mr. McGuinty said, I am 100% in agreement. The Prime Minister is not redacting anything." End quote. Mr. Ruff is a member of NSICOP. Mr. Cooper is just throwing out wild allegations based at best on speculation. Who do you think the public should believe, Mr. Ruff or Mr. Cooper? And Mr. Ruff is a Conservative member of Parliament who sits on NSICOP.
Mr. Chair, through you to our colleague, Mr. Gerritsen, thank you for the question. And I think that you highlight exactly one of the challenges in this space. So when colleagues, often benefiting from parliamentary privilege and the immunity that comes with that, assert a series of falsehoods and then purport to ask a question, it leads to a considerable disservice in the public understanding something as important as who gets to decide what portions of a report done by representatives of all political parties, including senators from the other place, Mr. Ruff being one of them, who would have been in those rooms while that report was being prepared, and for him to confirm that the redactions of that report are done by officials with zero input from any political staff person, from an elected person. And again, just to lay bare the falsehood of Mr. Cooper, the idea that the Prime Minister redacted that report, I think Mr. Ruff answered that very compellingly and confirmed that that is absolutely bogus.
I'll turn the rest of my time to Mr. Duguid.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritsen. Mr. Duguid, there's about 3 minutes, 15 seconds for your time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Ms. Drouin and Minister LeBlanc for appearing before us. Mr. Chair, this is a public meeting, I think, as everyone knows, and I'm sure the public has noted the enthusiasm with which Mr. LeBlanc is here today to speak to us. But I think I'll direct my question to Ms. Drouin. Again, because this is a public meeting, some of these terms that we're throwing around, cabinet confidence, solicitor-client privilege, I wonder if you could reflect a bit for us, why cabinet confidence is important, and this is a practice, as Mr. LeBlanc has noticed, in Commonwealth parliaments around the world, and has been practiced for a century and a half in our country. Why it is important, and what are the risks associated to national security in providing unfettered access to classified documents and waiving of cabinet confidence, and maybe a reflection as well on solicitor-client privilege. Just so the public can really understand this, this can perhaps be a learning moment.
Perfect. Let me start with the easiest one, solicitor-client privilege. This is really enshrined into our Constitution, making sure that you do have access to legal advice and that those legal advice will remain protected. And that privilege also applies to the Crown. When it comes to cabinet confidence, as Minister said previously, this is really at core of our Westminster system. And this is to allow ministers to give, options, opinion, advice to the cabinet, and then after a decision has been taken, to have that solidarity behind the decision. And we don't want to feather that in any shape or form in order to respect or to have a strong democracy. And let me make a link with FI, the foreign interference. Sorry again, I will learn. The first goal of foreign actors is to attack our democracy. This is really the first goal. So we need to protect our tools that are there in order to protect our democracy. And so this is why I think that cabinet confidence, this is not a partisan conversation. This is something that we should be proud of and that is absolutely essential for any government to govern. So that's about, in terms of intelligence. I'm sure you have heard about the challenge between using...
Madame Drouin, sorry to interrupt. I will let you finish, but if you could try to keep it to about 30,
Sorry
45
about that.
in your final segment. Thank you.
You've heard about intel to evidence. I'm sure you have heard about that. The reason is that when we collect intelligence, we are doing espionage in a way. We are doing that covertly. We are not giving the targets the opportunity to be heard. So throwing information in the public domain will not be responsible. On top of that, it can burn the essential sources that we have. So this is why we really need to be very careful.
Thank you, Madame Drouin. You may appreciate my father used to joke tongue-in-cheek that this was an AFZ, meaning an acronym-free zone. So I appreciate that there are many acronyms, of course, that we use. Ms. Kwan, the floor is yours for two... Oh, excuse. Non, c'est Madame Gaudreau premièrement. My apologies. The same amount of time will be given. Sorry, colleagues. Madame Gaudreau, malheureusement, j'ai fait une erreur.
Madame Gaudreau, sorry I made a mistake. It's over to you for 2 minutes 30. Excellent. I don't have much time, but let's talk about solutions now. We all agree here that there's over-classification. That's a culture that we've maintained, a culture of secrecy. For example, even if we compare with what's happening with Five Eyes countries and our neighbouring countries, we overclassify. That's quite clear. Now, we can't have a complete volte-face, complete turnaround. But for the good of the Commission, could our minister undertake at least to summarise certain documents but not redact the majority of the content so that the Commission can actually have enough components to do its work correctly? Can we have this undertaking from the Minister so that we don't meet again in another 3 months and say that things are not going smoothly and she's not able to do her work? Response, our colleague, Madame Gaudreau. Without any hesitation, I can give the undertaking that we'll continue, as we've done so far as a government, when we were drawing up the terms of reference and also since the Commission got up and running to do its work. We will continue to ensure that the Commission has access to all of the documents that the Commission needs to do its work. As I already mentioned, and as Madame Drouin has already mentioned, I also understand, I was also in the opposition as an MP. We shouldn't be too specific with certain statements, and I'm not attributing that to you, Madame Goudreau, to remain correct with all of this. But the fact that Mr. Mulroney or Mr. Harper or any other government or Mr. Trudeau father is not going to sweep away these principles that have existed for a long time. At the same time, we've shown openness to collaborate with the Commission. We've lifted the veil on cabinet confidences so that the Commission was able to have the documents it needed to do its work. But as I said in my opening comments, this is an active, ongoing discussion, and I've got full confidence in our colleagues within the Privy Council, the senior officials that continue with these discussions. And Madame Goudreau, I'm quite convinced that we won't be obliged to be here in another 3 months still discussing about certain points that have perhaps been expressed in the media and that perhaps don't give an exact snapshot of the work that's taking place between the government and the Commission. I really hope from the bottom of my heart that that is the case. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister.
The floor is yours for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate what the Minister just said, with the exception, though, that the Commissioner is not getting access to all the documents. She's made the request, and there are documents that are being withheld. And so I'm going to ask then maybe Madame Drouin this question. How many cabinet documents are being withheld?
I find this question interesting. So,
sorry, I'm just going to interrupt very quickly. I only have 2.5 minutes.
Perfect.
If you can just give me a short answer.
Like, I don't have the numbers, but if you're going to like that, many documents have been withheld. Of course, we haven't shared memorandum about dental. Of course, we haven't shared memorandum about pharmacare.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair,
so
if I
this is
may.
why it's impossible to respond how many have we withheld.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, I won't redact that from your time. So
Obviously, Mr. Chair, thank you to Madame Drouin. I'm not talking about document that's not relevant to the inquiry and his mandate. I'm talking about how many documents are being withheld that's relevant to the mandate of the inquiry.
I think I told you that all relevant documents that were to the point, talking about foreign interference, protecting our democracy. This is why those 4 big memorandum to cabinet, in order to be transparent, have been shared with them. They are the ones to the point that are really helping the Commission.
All right. Then can Madame Drouin confirm for this committee that there are no documents that are being withheld that would assist or provide any insight to Commissioner Hogue to fulfill her mandate? Can she just say yes or no to that question?
I cannot say, unfortunately, Monsieur le Président, I cannot say yes or no. Like maybe other memorandum to cabinet, talking about economic security, for example, that can talk about impacts of FI on our economy. So maybe there are some things that can be accessories to the main and relevant thing. And those are the conversations we can continue to have, but nothing to the point have been withheld from the Commission.
Well, even just on the issue, foreign interference related to the economy would be a critical document, because that could be a reason why the government took certain actions or didn't take certain actions, Mr. Chair, and that's precisely the point. It should not be for the government to make that determination, but rather for an independent commissioner to make that determination. Ultimately, what we all want coming out of this inquiry is to have faith in the process and into the inquiry and its outcome. If documents are withheld, you are going to undermine and undercut the work of the commissioner. I feel very strongly about that, and Canadians cannot afford it. This government cannot afford it. None of us could. And that's why it's so important for the government to release all documents that the commissioner is requesting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kwan. We're quite a bit over, but I am going to permit the minister just a moment.
Chair, just very briefly, I just want to correct something Ms. Kwan said. The commission was set up to look at foreign interference in democratic institutions and democratic processes. We specifically did not set up a commission to look at economic interference. So to be very precise, that was a discussion we had with House leaders. The terms of reference are clear. So to use the example that Madame Drouin properly used, and then Ms. Kwan ran with the idea that documents around Investment Review Act decisions that Mr. Champagne and I might make are specifically excluded by the terms of reference because Madame Justice Hogue is focusing on democratic institutions and foreign interference. I just think we need to be very precise about that.
Okay, thanks very much, Ms. Kwan. Thank you, Minister. Monsieur Berthold, à vous, 5 minutes.
Monsieur Leblanc, fardeau de la
5 minutes. The burden of proof is on the shoulders of the Prime Minister and your government. Why? It's because you've been very nonchalant, at least on 3 occasions. The Prime Minister has refused to listen to the recommendations asking to publish documents or to provide information to MPs. And then secondly, there were lots of different attempts to refuse to answer questions. And then there was the nomination of a special rapporteur that really didn't work and nobody had confidence in that. And now with Justice Ogg and with the preliminary report, we were quite right in not showing confidence and putting trust in the special rapporteur. And it seems that the most appropriate documents apparently are going to be handed over to Justice Ogg according to the National Security Advisor. But by chance, the most relevant documents are, in fact, the documents that were covered by leaks by Mr. Bob Fife. So the 4 cabinet memoranda were the memoranda that appeared in the press. So, Minister, do the documents have to be leaked to the press so that they then become relevant for the Ogg Commission? First of all, Chair, and my friend Mr. Berthold, the answer is no. But I'd like to correct once again something, and Madame Drouin perhaps would like to add something. The leaks that we've seen did not refer to the 4 cabinet documents that we handed over to the Commission. So that really is a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. 4 other documents. There are other documents that should have been handed over, but were not handed over to Justice Ogg. How many documents have been handed over to her, and how many have not been handed over? You've been avoiding that question from the outset, and I'd like to cite Madame Drouin. She said, unfortunately, with the leaks, this has allowed the Commission to be very specific in its requests. So Justice Ogg has very specific documentation requests. And on the other hand, we're hearing that Justice Ogg does not have access to all documents. So, Minister Leblanc, why is your government so opaque and is not wanting to play this game of transparency to restore Canadians' confidence in the system? Response, Mr. Chair, I see that our colleagues are bursting out laughing with that comment from Mr. Berthold. It was a Liberal colleague who was laughing, says Mr. Berthold. He knows very well, Mr. Chair, that we've acted in good faith and we've been very transparent with the Ogg Commission. But, Chair, do you see the type of confusion that creeps in here? Mr. Berthold has asserted that these were cabinet documents that appeared in the press. In fact, they were documents from the security agencies that were covered by these leaks. And 46,000 documents of this type have already been handed over to the Ogg Commission. So there's a great deal of confusion, it seems, between the highly classified intel documents and, on the other hand, a few documents, as Mr. Harper already maintained as well during his time in government, that they're covered by cabinet confidence. Minister, I'll give the floor to Mr. Berthold. Thank you very much. So it's not time to talk about Mr. Harper. We're talking about you. We're talking about your government that from the outset has done everything it can to stop shedding light on foreign interference and has been covering up names and reporting it and is not taking action. And you're saying that these are documents that were not for the cabinet, but unfortunately the national security agencies wanted these documents to be read by the cabinet, Mr. Leblanc. That's where the confusion started. How can we trust the Liberals currently with that? We want to have confidence in Justice Ogg's report. So why are you refusing to give her access to all of the documents that she is requesting? Response, Mr. Chair, that's another example of this type of confusion. Our colleague, Mr. Berthold, is seen camouflaging, covering up the names, but following criminal legislation kind of doesn't mean that we're exactly camouflaging names. And then he refers to a parliamentary report the Conservatives voted against the creation of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. The former government didn't set up any measures to bring about transparency, as we have seen right away in this very conversation today. And then to round off, Chair, I have full confidence in the work undertaken by Justice Ogg, and I have full confidence that her report is going to shed light and restore confidence for Canadians and give possible solutions to the government, and I hope also to the Parliament, to further reinforce our measures to counter foreign interference, as we've done since we came into power. Mr. Berthold, just a few seconds left. Mr. Berthold, just to specify something. The national report from NSICOP, which was published on the 5th of June, clearly stated that the Prime Minister and the government have withheld 1,000 documents from the committee by saying, or by using in an appropriate way, cabinet confidences to avoid to render public this information. That's exactly what NSICOP said. And Mr. Leblanc, the confusion is on your side. I think with everything we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years in terms of foreign interference, I think it's time to tidy up things and fully collaborate with the justice. If you want to have give an answer, Madame Drouin, quickly. Madame Drouin, we're certainly not talking about 1,000 cabinet memoranda. As senior officials, when we draw up a memorandum for the cabinet, there's several emails that are related to that. There's lots of different versions related to this memorandum to cabinet. There may be speaking points developed for respective ministers for the purposes of the cabinet discussion. So one file within the cabinet can generate an incredible panoply of various documents. So I'm very comfortable in affirming to you that we're not talking about 1,000 cabinet files as such. I'm extremely comfortable in saying that. And I'd like to repeat, please, quickly, Madame Drouin, in the Commission of Public Inquiry, there will be no intelligence documents from our security agencies have been withheld from the Commission. They have everything that they've asked for in terms of the work undertaken by our 2 main agencies. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Berthold. Thank you, Madame Drouin. Mr. Gerritsen.
Speaker for this round. 5 minutes to you.
Thank you, and thank you to both Minister LeBlanc and Madame Drouin for being here today and answering these questions. I think the frustration that you're seeing from across the table from my Conservative colleagues comes from the fact that they're not able to get you to help feed their narrative of secrecy. They're extremely frustrated by that, and I think that it's evident that's because you've answered the questions very clearly and directly today. And the reality is if you were somebody to walk in this room and sit at the back of the room and having just listened to what we listened to today, I think you would have heard very clearly Minister LeBlanc saying that the terms of reference for the Hogue Commission and the documents to be turned over were set up in collaboration with the House leaders, including Andrew Scheer, the House Leader of the Conservative Party, and the other House leaders last summer, and that the documents that were requested have been turned over, and that the Privy Council office continues to work with the Hogue Commission to ensure that documents that she needs and wants are provided. My question, and this actually goes on a topic that we haven't talked about today, and that's the various different party leaders and their willingness to get security clearance so that they can read the unredacted version of the Hogue Commission's report. We know that obviously the Prime Minister has seen that. We know that the leader of the NDP has. We now know that the leader of the Bloc Québécois is receiving his security clearance to do that. Yet we also know that the leader of the Conservative Party, Mr. Poilievre, has chosen willingly to not receive the security clearance in order to see an unredacted version of the report. I'm wondering, Minister, if you can provide some insight as to why that might be, and if not, perhaps provide context as to why it's incredibly important for a leader of a political party to take the opportunity to look at that information.
So, Mr. Chair, through you to our colleague, Mr. Gerritsen, I think that your question is an important one because it goes to the very nature of what some people in the House of Commons continue to do, is to create deliberately an exaggerated or misleading narrative, while at the same time not benefiting from a government offer that stands, again, this morning, or I guess in early afternoon, for the Leader of the Opposition to receive the appropriate security clearance and then see the unredacted version. The fact that Ms. May and the Leader of the NDP took the government offer, took up the government offer, we think is very constructive. You'll note that they seem to have a different view, having read the document one from the other. That perhaps tells us that it's important for people to come to their own conclusions, having seen the unredacted report of the committee. Those redactions, as we noted earlier, were done by officials responsible for national security, the protection of national security information, not done politically. So why the Leader of the Opposition would refuse to do, I can't speculate. I wondered the same thing, Mr. Gerritsen, myself. But I do think it would be important for the credibility of his caucus colleagues who continue to make outlandish and absurd allegations and assertions. They might have, petit moment de gêne, a little hesitation to do that if their boss said, you know what, guys, like, you're really making this stuff up. I don't know how their caucus would work. Neither would you, I assume, Mr. Gerritsen, but certainly I think there might be a little hesitancy to continue making stuff up all the time if your boss knew that what you were saying day after day may not be.
Ignorance is bliss.
That might be one of the strategies there, but it's an interesting thing. Perhaps we could talk about that over the summer.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Minister.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gerritsen. Colleagues, that concludes the first panel for the day. Minister LeBlanc, thank you very much for making yourself available and joining us here this morning. Madame Drouin, thank you as well. Colleagues, Madame Drouin will be staying with us for the next hour. A friendly reminder that the next hour is not a continuation of this study. The next hour is a continuation of our study on the cyber attacks, which we have been talking about previously. We are going to suspend very briefly in order to turn over, and we'll be back momentarily. All right, everyone, if I could ask you to please take your seats. Trouvez vos sièges, please.
Find your seats.
We are going to continue with the second half of our meeting. The second half of the meeting is a continuation of our study in relation to the question of privilege related to cyber attacks targeting members of Parliament. Of course, we've been undertaking a conversation around this in recent weeks. Carried over from the previous session, Madame Drouin, welcome back. Thank you for being here with us. Madame Drouin, of course, the Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister. And Madame Xavier, welcome back. nice to see you again. Thank you for joining us. Madame Xavier is the chief of the Communications Security Establishment. Between the two of you witnesses, il y a jusqu'à 10 minutes.
You have up to 10 minutes.
You certainly don't have to take all of that time if you don't feel it's necessary. We will then enter our usual rounds of questioning. With that, Madame Drouin and Madame Xavier, I'll turn the floor over to you for upwards of 10 minutes combined. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'll give you some opening remarks from me, and then also we'll hear from the Chief of the CST. Thank you for accompanying me today. I know that she has come here on several occasions. Her expertise is essential given the subject that we're tackling today. So I'm Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and National Security Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister since January 27, 2024. And recently, as part of this committee's work, members have heard testimony from my colleague, as I've already previously stated, and you've talked about cyber threats from foreign actors. Cyber espionage programs sponsored by China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea pose a real threat to Canada. These actors exploit our weaknesses at various levels, and in so doing, they aim, as I've said earlier this morning, to erode our democracy in order to pursue their geopolitical objectives at Canada's expense.
It's not the only state who directs cyber threat activity towards Canada. I must emphasize the far-reaching and sustained nature of the PRC's cyber activities. PRC cyber actors have targeted and continue to target the systems and networks of a wide spectrum of Canadian society, including all levels of government, private sector organization, as well as individuals. All these aspects of Canadian society have information that could be considered valuable to the PRC. The scope of this threat is significant. The more we discuss, the more we understand how to best respond to these threats from a whole of society perspective. The Government of Canada has warned Canadians of the cyber threat caused by state actors. And most recently, on June 3rd, the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, National Defense, and Public Safety issued a public statement warning Canadians on the threat posed by foreign states targeting Canada. The statement and the CSC cyber threat bulletin that were released highlighted the interference in our democratic system that has resulted from these efforts. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity has joined international partners in issuing public advisories to inform on techniques used by the PRC state actors and also by those, and most importantly, how to mitigate those threats. The use of cybermen by the PRC and other states to intervene in our political system will not stop. And to address that threat, we must continue to take steps to reinforce Canada's overall resiliencies to hostile cyber activity. The government is in the process of renewing Canada's national cyber security strategy, which we anticipate will bring a wide range of initiatives over the course of its implementation. En ce qui concerne la cybersécurité,
when it comes to cybersecurity for parliamentarians, a certain number of changes have taken place in recent years. The Canadian Cybersecurity Centre works closely with various partners, including the House of Commons and Senate staff, in order to protect parliamentarians from cyber threats. CSIS also plays an important role in identifying and responding to threats to the security of Parliament.
The Minister of Public Safety issued a direction to CSIS on threats to the security of Canada directed to Parliament and parliamentarians. CSIS and CSE and other departments and agencies have also undertaken a significant number of briefings to parliamentarians on a wide range of threats, including cyber threats. Security clearances have been offered to party leaders to enable a more direct understanding of the threats facing parliamentarians and all Canadians. As a result, the level of information sharing and transparency regarding threats to parliamentarians is much higher now than a few years ago, and we continue to learn and improve our system. I would be remiss if I do not underline the important work of NCCOP and NCRA. Chair, allow me to use those acronyms because I think you know them well. As illustrated in their recent reports on foreign interference in Canada's election, those two organizations have enriched the public understanding and the public debate regarding national security and intelligence in Canada. These reports have highlighted the use of cyber tools by threat actors to interfere in democratic institutions and to undertake espionage campaigns against political parties and parliamentarians. Dans son rapport spécial,
In its special report, the NCCOP mentioned that a cyber actor led by the State of the People's Republic of China had unsuccessfully targeted members of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Now, by way of conclusion,
incident in question was handled in 2021. However, I can say that the Government of Canada is very focused on how to best inform parliamentarians of national security threats. Dans une société démocratique, la lutte
in a democratic society, combating threats to national security requires informed, non-partisan public debate between government and the public, as well as with parliamentarians. This type of debate that we're holding this morning is very important because it helps us to better understand the threats which we face as a country. And it also helps us to strengthen our ability to respond to these threats as part of a whole of society approach. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop here, and myself and my colleague are available to answer questions from the committee. Thank you very much, Madame Drouin.
To our first line of questioning, Mr. Genis, the floor will be yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Xavier, we had 3 rounds of questioning previously. I'm going to follow up on some of those questions because I reread our exchanges and there were some things I noticed that I wanted to probe a little bit more. First off, in my 3rd round, I had asked about caveats in terms of information that was shared with the House of Commons. I think you had said you had to get back to us. I assume you have that information now. Were there any caveats in the information shared with the House of Commons in terms of limitations on who they could then share that information with, et cetera?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So when we share information with anybody, especially when it's pieces of intelligence...
Just a very specific question. Were there caveats in this case?
It is very possible that there would be caveats. In terms of the briefings, because we held many briefings with the House of Commons, it is very possible that some of the documentation with...
Ma'am, I asked you this question previously. I wasn't asking if it was possible. I asked if there were caveats.
So because, Mr. Chair, I wasn't in the meetings myself, I don't know exactly which documents were shared with the House of Commons. But I would expect that some of the documents that we did share with the House of Commons would have had caveats, especially based on classification.
Okay.
Having said
would those
that,
have limited their ability to share information with others?
So, Mr. Chair, it is possible that had there been caveats on the documentations provided, that those caveats would only be able to be shared with people with similar classification.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying it's possible, but you're not willing or ready to confirm?
Mr. Genis, just one moment.
So, point of order, please. Over to you, Madame Goudreau. Now, I just have access to French interpretation, and when the interpreter says inaudible, then clearly I think that my colleague is perhaps talking too fast. Yes, I quite understand, is the response from the chair.
Mr. Genis, just in terms of allowing the witness the opportunity to respond, I will be generous with the time. We've gained a little bit of time throughout the course of the meeting. So if the concern is about rushing, don't worry. The quality of the question and answer is more important. Madame Xavier, if you can do your best to speak more slowly. Mr. Genis, if you can do your best to speak more slowly and also to try to ensure that we're not speaking over one another.
Alors, rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président, quelle était la question?
Point of order, what was the question? That's the information that's missing for me. The quality of the question, which question? The question from Mr. Genis. That's what I didn't receive. Okay.
Seems that Madame Gaudreau did not hear it. So I've stopped the clock. If you could repeat your previous question, Madame Gaudreau, s'il y a des enjeux qui continuent.
If there's any other issue, please let me know, Madame Gaudreau.
Okay. If you could just repeat the question, though, because I think there seemed to have been a translation.
Sure, okay. Let me know when you're starting the time. But to summarize the round, if there were translation problems so far, I have asked if there were caveats that limited the House of Commons from sharing information with parliamentarians. And the response we're getting is it's possible that there could have been without confirmation that there was.
Okay, so I am now going to start the clock.
Okay, thank you. And we can make this easier for ourselves and for interpreters just with clear questions, clear answers. Are you prepared to tell us whether or not there were caveats? Not whether it was possible that there were caveats, but whether there were. And if you're not, is it because you don't know or because you don't wish to share that information?
Mr. Chair, I can assure you it's not because I don't wish to share the information, but it is because I wasn't personally present at the time of when we were having some of these exchanges with this House of Commons IT security
Okay,
team.
that's good enough. Will you, I did ask this question previously, and I was told you could get back to us, and you're back, and you still aren't able to answer. Would you undertake to provide a response to this committee in writing, specifically regarding caveats, within 2 weeks?
So, Mr. Chair, we'd be happy to be able to answer the question in writing, and we are waiting for the official taskings out of the last time
Okay.
I was present at PROC to be able to
within
answer
2 weeks?
all of the other questions that were also asked of us.
Within 2 weeks?
I suspect we should be able to do that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I had asked you a series of questions in my first round about what you communicated with the House of Commons, and you had and I noticed something afterwards when I was reviewing this. I had asked if you informed House administration about the source of the attack. And you said that you had informed them about, quote, what we believed at the time to be the originating source of the attack. And then I asked you in follow-up, so you shared with the House of Commons administration the source of the attack, that being APT 31. And then your response changed. You suggested we go in camera, and then you variously dodged the follow-ups. And at no point did you confirm that APT 31 was identified to House of Commons administration as the threat. So I want to press that point because I noticed that you didn't answer about APT 31 specifically. Did you, at any point, inform House of Commons administration that APT 31 specifically was the source of the attack?
So, Mr. Chair, when we started the conversation with the House of Commons, it was in 2021. And at that time, it is very possible that we were not calling this actor APT 31. So what we were sharing with the House of Commons was what we were at that time understanding to be the originating actions and the threat actor, which we now have come to know as APT 31. What I cannot confirm and guarantee, Mr. Chair, is that at that time we were calling it APT 31.
So at what point in time did you mention APT 31 specifically to House of Commons administration? Not in 2021, it sounds like, but at some point in the future, or never?
What I'm understanding is that we did eventually come to confirm to the House of Commons that this actor was APT 31. What I'm saying is that originally, when we started to understand the actor, we may not have called it APT 31.
But just when did you identify the actor to the House?
My understanding is that based on the exchanges that we've had with the House of Commons and the presentations that we made collectively with CSIS, it might have been around February of 2021 that we then may have alluded to that being the possible actor by that name.
So you did, or you think you might have named APT 31 in February of 2021?
So in the presentations that were done by ourselves and CSIS,
I'm almost out of time. Just yes or no.
There were a series of documents that were shared with the IT team, and one of those documents outlines that the actor could be APT 31.
It could have been. Okay. So this is the problem we have with the government's narrative is they said House of Commons IT was told and they were supposed to tell MPs, but You said there may have been caveats, and you can't confirm whether there were or not, but there may have been caveats. And you can't confirm whether the House of Commons was even told that APT 31 was the source of the threat. So how in the world could House of Commons IT have informed members of Parliament if there were caveats and if they weren't informed who the source of the actor was? And we've had you here twice. We've asked you specific questions about that information being passed along, and you haven't been able to answer. You've told us there might have been caveats, that the information might have been shared, it might not have been shared, it might have been in a document. You're not sure which document, and you're not precisely sure of the timeline. Do you see how this completely blows up the government's claim that the House of Commons IT was properly informed?
Mr. Jennings, if there is a question, I will afford Ms. Xavier a moment. But
I think the point is clear, but I'd welcome a response if
okay.
There is
well.
one.
Ms. Xavier, very quickly, if you'd like to
So,
respond.
Mr. Chair, what I've made clear and what I'm trying to emphasize is that when you're dealing with cyber incidents, at the beginning, you may not know all the details. And so eventually, as you continue to have the back and forth conversation with the service provider, you come more clarity comes to be, especially when there's exchanges of the logs. And at the time, we may not have originally known it was APT 31, but in the exchange of information that we had with the House of Commons, there was sufficient information provided for them to know what the issue was that was at risk, what actions they needed to take to mitigate.
The FBI told you, though. It was the FBI said who it was. You had this information because the FBI gave it to you, and you didn't pass it along.
Colleagues, I would very much appreciate if the chair's role in facilitating a meeting was respected. I have done my best throughout the course of the last hour and the beginning of this hour to be very generous in affording members the opportunity to ask questions and witnesses the opportunity to respond to those questions. I'm going to be less generous if I feel as though that's being taken advantage of. I appreciate your cooperation in that matter. I'm going to turn the floor over now to Ms. Romanato for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being with us. My first question will be to Madame Drouin. First of all, welcome to the role of NSIA. I don't think you've been to PROC since you started in this role. Can you confirm with us, in your role as the National Security Intelligence Advisor, do you have a mandate that would include informing members of Parliament or parliamentarians of an active threat?
Thank you for this question. One thing that I would like to, that we all kind of looked at is the ways in which we are dealing with threat in 2024 is quite different from the ways in which we were dealing with that in the past. And that is good. That is good that we continue to involve and enhance our processes, and we need to continue to do that. With the new directive that was adopted last year in terms of sharing with parliamentarians the threats we are facing, it is much clearer now that handling a situation like the one we're talking about will trigger a conversation with implicated MPs. One thing, though, that I would like to say, and I'm not an expert when it comes to CSC work, but when they see a cyber threat, the first thing they need to do is to stop the bleeding. That's the first thing. Like, we want to make sure that the actor doesn't have access to data, and that if information have been infiltrated, that we can recuperate those information. So the first focus is really to stop the threat. After that,
I don't want to cut you off. It's just that I do have quite a few questions. So I understand that when there is an immediate threat vis-a-vis our systems, that the goal is to stop the bleeding, as you said. However, in the case that we're studying right now with respect to members of Parliament, parliamentarians who were targeted, I understand that this was in 2021. You were not in the role at that time. But you mentioned that once, I guess, the bleeding has been stopped, that there is a new ministerial directive to the CSIS to advise members of Parliament. You also mentioned in your opening statement that on June 3rd, Foreign Affairs, National Defense and Public Safety issued a cyber threat bulletin warning Canadians. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm just going to ask you, were parliamentarians provided that cyber threat bulletin?
I will turn to my colleague for that.
So thank you for the question. So all bulletins that are issued in a public manner, and they're put on websites, and we amplify any publication with other means through social media, circulating it to service providers, and various ways. So the publication itself wasn't directed only for a certain number of people. On the contrary, we want to make sure that they're as public as possible so they could be useful to whoever could find them useful.
So on that, Madame Xavier, I never received it. So I understand you're saying you put it out on social media on the website, but you understand we ourselves have said to you and to various people that we are targets. You've mentioned we are targets given the work that we do. And yet parliamentarians did not receive that cyber threat bulletin that may or may not have a specific target to us, but we were not made aware of it either. So what I'm trying to get to is that we are trying to improve the communications to parliamentarians whenever there is an active threat, whether it be directly to them or to be on the lookout. And that seems to be there's still a gap. I still don't, it's not clear to me who is responsible for letting members of parliament and senators know about a cyber threat. Can someone, because when CSIS was here, they said it wasn't them. When IT was here, they said it wasn't them. When you were here last, it wasn't you. So whose job is it to notify members of parliament?
So you for this question. So maybe let me say one thing. Not all cyber attack are personal attack to MPs. So that, like, we should not make an equation that all cyber attack means that a specific MP was targeting. Sometimes it's completely random. And then it is more for the administrator of the system and the network to make sure that they have the appropriate mechanism to stop the threat. When it comes to threat to specific MPs, as I said, the directive that was adopted last year will come into play and will trigger specific briefings to MPs. We also coordinate with the House and the Senate when it comes to briefings to parliamentarians. You may be aware that such a briefing in terms of the threat that MPs may face have begun, and some of them happened last week. And maybe my colleague Caroline can talk about the several briefings that you have done over the past years to parliamentarians.
So actually, I only have 5 seconds, so I'm very well over the report that was tabled in the House on the number of parliamentarians who have been briefed, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Romanato. Madame Gaudreau, à vous pour 6 minutes.
You now have 6 minutes, Madame Gaudreau. Thank you very much. So we see each other again, and it's the first time for you, Madame Drouin, but we've seen you over the last 2 weeks. And I hadn't really seen the difference between what happened in public and what happened in camera, because we put very specific questions to you. And I personally was hoping to have specific answers, namely, basically, for this committee to become a type of examining committee. And you have seen that our parliamentary colleagues have explained to us that it's thanks to the FBI, it was thanks to them that we knew about this. I thought, wow, and how do you actually ascertain this? And imagine I'm kind of flabbergasted here. I've come across a document that was published on the 15th of December. I even provided it to all of my colleagues because I said to them, look, it's the National Security Agency for IT Systems, and publicly, there it is. It refers to ATP 31, the vectors, the infection chain, the methods of invasion, and all of the different techniques and all the different tactics are in there. And I'd like to be reassured by you. I thought you'd said, yes, we're going to correct course, we're going to keep you informed, and we're going to guide you. But when I came across this, when I stumbled across this, I thought, is there some will deliberately to not inform us, or is there some sort of protocol out there whereby we have to wait for things to get worse before something happens? I need to understand about all this because it's very worrisome. Mr. Chair, thank you for that question and the comment. Yes, in fact, this publication to which you've referred, it's something that we published in partnership with that agency, and it's because we recognize that ATP 31 can be quite a persistent, solid actor, and we're not immune to that. Here in Canada, we want to be aware of the fact that this exists, just to specify that this is a document from France. It doesn't come from the CSE. Yes, it wasn't from us. You're quite right. But we do work closely with other partners to be aware of other publications that come out to diffuse these further. We work with partners, and we realize we are not the only ones coming out with reports. So that's why we form these partnerships. And when this type of publication comes up, we want to try and diffuse it further. Having said that, I'd like to reassure you we take very seriously the comments in this committee and the reports that are pursued here, and we will look at the recommendations very closely to improve things. And I'd also like to add that since the conversations that we had the last time I was here, we've had several meetings with the House of Commons to continue to improve the way in which we can work more closely with them, and in particular so that we are able to better serve you. Madame Goudreau, well, we could do things the other way around, couldn't we? First of all, we could give you the elements from our daily life, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes people say, okay, it comes from the private email, but we don't have much of a private life. So perhaps individuals who are drawing up strategies, just like when I say I want to be your client, because otherwise if I don't put up my hand, it seems that people are always saying it's not me, and it seems that nobody's really dealing with this. And I do understand that there's a protocol that's going to be developed, but I'd like to have your opinion on this, because CSIS mentioned to us that there is a type of monitoring committee. It's a cross-partisan committee with each of the teams in the CSE and the CSIS and others perhaps, so that they can monitor the situation. I think Australia already has that type of process in place. So I'd like to hear more about this, because things are going too fast elsewhere, and it seems that we can't keep a pace with everything that's happening at such a rapid pace. Sorry, Chair, I'm not very sure about this question. Okay, I'll repeat it. Can you perhaps stop the clock for me, please? I'll try and be brief. So what do you think about the setting up of a committee such as the one that's been set up by the Australian government to actually constantly monitor what's happening together with various collaboration partners, namely the government or Five Eyes partners, because we don't have that at the moment. Do you agree with that idea? Chair, I very much agree with anything that could continue to really beef up our cyber resilience. And as has been mentioned by the member, we would pursue any avenue that's useful. So we'll base ourselves on the recommendations that we receive, and we'll follow this up with our Australian colleagues, because they have learned a great deal, because this particular actor has had an impact on their parliament as well. So these are definitely things that can be examined and possibly set up. Well, that's excellent. Something that also really surprised me. Sorry, Madame Goudreau, you've just got 15 seconds left. Okay, well, I'll use that under my 2 minutes 30. Yes, I'll add those 20 seconds to your 2 minutes 30 later. Thank you.
The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the witnesses for being here today as well. You know, what is clear through this whole situation is that there has been major gaps in government action in informing members of parliament. whether it be in the case of MP Michael Chong, who's being targeted, that require for a leak to provide that information, or in this instance, through a cyber attack of parliamentarians, that it actually came from another source from the FBI for them to be informed. So what's clear is that this is not a one-off by way of miscommunication or poor communication, but rather is a systemic issue. That's the way I see it. Over and over again, we are learning important information where members of parliament, parliamentarians should be informed, and we're not. And in this instance, with the cyber attacks, as was indicated, we have different agencies that's come before this committee, and everyone else was pointing a finger to someone else to say that they're responsible. And that has to be not acceptable. I hope that the government will accept that. So maybe my first question is, does the government accept responsibility? What's happened in this pattern of behavior is simply not acceptable.
What I think that together we need to is, first of all, take foreign interference very seriously, cyber threat also. We are all learning together. I said it in my opening remarks. I think that if something like that happened today, it will be handled differently based on our collective experience, based on the ministerial directive. So yes, and I think that we shouldn't forget that the tweeter here is not us or is not you. Like, it's really the foreign actors. And together we need to be stronger in order to respond appropriately to the foreign actors. So yes, we are taking those lessons. Yes, we can improve the system. We can handle things differently. But we all need to do that in order to be stronger in front of those hostile state actors.
Well, the question then is, how will things be done differently? The truth of the matter is, I don't believe that the government has taken foreign interference activities very seriously, at least not until this moment. And in fact, we heard through the commissioner in the inquiry that Canada is actually way behind the 8 ball, through the witnesses at the inquiry. Canada is way behind the 8 ball in comparison to our allied countries. Everyone else is miles ahead of us, and we're only just starting to wake up to it. So I guess the question is this: when can parliamentarians receive documentation on how the government intends to proceed if lessons are indeed learned in going forward? And will there be adjustments, for example, with intelligence that's come through? Because there are instances where I think there is an overreach in protective of information because of the notion of national security. When will that be adjusted? And then the third question related to this is this: even within the government's very many departments and different setups and agencies in looking into this matter, there is actually not a coherent process coming out of that. And we learned, for example, the site task force did not inform Elections Canada in real time when they have information that a particular candidate is maybe subject to foreign interference activities, and they were not informed of that in real time. And even when a complaint was made, that information was still not shared with Elections Canada. How is this possible, and what will be done to address this litany of mistakes, and when will the government undertake an approach that actually connects the dots with all these activities to create a coherent picture?
Let me start with something you have just done as parliamentarians. You have just adopted C-70. C-70 will give us new tools to address new realities. And for example, being able to talk about foreign interference with other level of government. the private sector, academics. So just that is a new tool that is very important. Through the Commission, we have also worked very hard in terms of trying to sanitize and do summary when it comes to foreign intelligence documents. This is a new reality for us. We haven't done that before, and that was in order to make those documents more accessible and transparent. Other countries, yes, it's true, are doing declassification. We've heard many times U.S. Talking about the fact that they have declassified information before the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. So we can also learn from that and do that differently in a more regular manner. The flow of information.
Just in a few seconds to wrap up, please.
So the flow of information, we have talked about it. You saw that. It is something that the system has started to address. My predecessor has done tremendous work regarding that, and I'm continuing because it's true that trying to find who saw what when, it is something very important for all of us.
Thank you very much. Just before we go back to the Conservatives for the next question, Madame Gaudreau, je comprends que vous doit...
Madame Gaudreau, I understand that you have to leave us for a special celebration in a few moments. So I'd like to thank you for your contributions over the last few months. And I hope that you have a great summer. So thank you very much and congratulations to your family. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and all the best of our colleagues. Thank you. So now we'll give the floor to you in a few moments.
Is yours for 5 minutes.
Madame Drouin, I want to follow up on some of the statements you've made today that have frankly not been true at all. You'd said that, quote, on the inquiry, quote, nothing has been withheld, and then later said in an exchange that the Commission, they have everything they've asked for. That's not true. If that were the case, why did the legal counsel for Madame Justice Hogue to our committee only within the last couple of weeks say, quote, discussions between the Commission and the government on the issue of disclosure of cabinet confidences are ongoing? And for
Point of order,
sorry,
Mr. Chair.
where is that coming from?
Sorry,
Oh,
it's
Sherry,
me.
sorry. I'm hearing. I thought I was hearing voices. Ms. Romanato.
My apologies. I'm just kind of confused. I don't know if Mr. Duncan knows that we're not on the same study. We're on the study about the cyber attacks.
It is a fair reminder. And Mr. Duncan, let's finish the line of questioning. But it is a fair reminder that we are here more specifically on the cyber attacks. But finish the line of questioning. Let's see where it goes. Madame Drouin, you'll have a moment to answer that question.
Where I'm going with this is the pattern of cover-ups that have been happening time and time again on this issue. So my question is, I've mentioned about the letter from the legal counsel. If, quote, everything they've been asked for, they've got, why are they still going through a legal process with you to get the documents that they deem relevant and what they want to have?
Monsieur le Président, je peux répondre à cette question. Je vais essayer.
Mr. Chair, I can answer that question. I'll try and be brief.
I'd like us to be clear. We are putting everything in the same basket, talking about information. So there's different type of information. What I have said is that all intelligence information, relevant and classified information, heavily classified information, relevant to the mandate of the Commission, everything has been shared with the Commission without exercising any kind of privileges. And then the other part of your question are more related to potentially memorandum to cabinet. And this is why I also shared with you that the most to-the-point documents, the 4 most relevant documents were shared with the Commission, and the ongoing conversation is about potentially other memorandum to cabinet that accessory may have talked about.
And here's the problem, Madame Drouin, because it's the most relevant deemed by you, deemed by the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office, and the Privy Council office, making that determination of what is relevant. The terms of reference that were set says, quote, it authorizes the Commissioner to receive and review any relevant classified or unclassified documents. And here's the thing for Canadians watching this and what is happening. This is like a courtroom trial where the accused that's on the stand gets to choose what evidence the judge gets to see. The reason this inquiry is going on and the reason there's been so much scrutiny is the action, or frankly, the lack of action on combating foreign interference from the Prime Minister, the PMO, and the PCO. So will you explain to Canadians why the very groups I just mentioned, including yourself, under scrutiny, get to select what evidence the justice gets to see? Why don't you provide everything, not that you deem relevant, but that she deems relevant?
I like the comparison with the litigation. As you know, have been managed a lot of litigations and a lot of e-discoveries in my life. And this is how it works. We do proceed in terms of collecting, based on the questions we are receiving, all the materials, and then we disclose to the court. Like this assessment, and this is based on good faith, and there are consequences if we are not acting in good faith and trying to hide things. But this is at core of the process.
And I will just argue there's consequences when Canadians look at this and see that documents are not being provided as requested by the justice leading this. And so we talk about consequences. It's the integrity of this commission and having the Justice, Madame Justice Hogue, feeling like she has everything she needs to be able to do a proper investigation. Clearly, when lawyers and legal counsel are meeting back and forth, they're clearly not happy. I'm going to pass the remainder of my time over to Mr. Cooper.
Just one moment, Mr. Cooper. I will stop the clock. Madame Drouin, I will offer you a brief opportunity to respond.
I just want to say that we will all benefit from the work of the Commission and its recommendation. It's not on the advantage of any of us to withhold information in order for her to be relevant in her conclusions. Listen to her. And then, of course, we do have a responsibility as civil servant to strike the right balance in protecting, which is really important for you in terms of the cabinet confidence and making sure that she can do her job. But we all want her to succeed because we want Canada to succeed.
Thank you very much, Madame Drouin. Mr. Cooper, I'm going to restart the clock. There are 45 seconds remaining.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will move a motion that I had put on notice, and I'll read it, that given the large workload the committee is managing, the committee instructs the chair to schedule 5 meetings between July 8th, 2024 and September 13th, 2024 to address the report of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians titled Special Report on Foreign Interference in Canada's Democratic Processes and Institutions, tabled in Parliament on June 3rd, 2024, and to continue the committee's ongoing work on foreign election interference. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will make very brief remarks. This committee has a lot of work that is outstanding. That includes Bill C-65, which has passed second reading and that is going to be referred to our committee. It's a bit legislation, government legislation that takes priority. We have Scott Reed's motion, as well as Alex Ruff's private members bill. We continue our work on this study with respect to the question of privilege arising from the cyber attack directed against 18 parliamentarians, and we are continuing work with respect to the broader issue of foreign interference, and there are a number of issues that have arisen coming out of the NSCOP report, the NCIRA report, as well as the Hogue report. So having regard for all of that, I think it is necessary that this committee meet over the summer. 5 meetings. I think that's a very reasonable compromise to try to get some of the work around foreign interference done so that we can move on in the fall to deal with government legislation, as well as the private members' motion and private members' bill that we must review.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. The speaking order to begin debate on Mr. Cooper's motion is as follows. Should you want your name added to the list, simply let me know. Mr. Garrettson, followed by Ms. Matheson, followed by Mr. Jennis. Mr. Garrettson, the floor is yours.
Well, first to our witnesses, I just want to thank you for being here today. And I can only imagine the frustration of repeating the same thing over and over and over to be met by a complete stonewall from my four Conservative colleagues who are just unwilling to accept or listen to what the witnesses have been telling us today repeatedly. There is just so much desire from my Conservative colleagues to make this as hyper-partisan as possible. They're not interested in actually dealing with the issue of foreign interference, despite the fact that it is an extremely serious issue that needs to be dealt with seriously. They're interested in political gain. Mr. Cooper, I'll tell you what's going on here. Mr. Cooper wants us to vote against this so he can walk out and film a video and put it out there on social media. Oh, Mr. Jennis will help him do that. I'm sure they'll film videos of each other so that they can then go, Mr. Chair, and try to fundraise off this by saying cover up and all this stuff. Meanwhile, I mean, if you had just walked into this room, Mr. Chair, and not known where you were going and just happened to sit in the back of this room and just listen to the exchanges that are going on here today, the average layperson, completely unbiased to any of this, completely uninformed, would probably leave here completely bewildered at the fact that Conservatives are just unwilling to listen to a single word that the witnesses they call before the committee have offered. Madame Drain made an extremely a good observation early on in her second half of this discussion today. She talked about this is not partisan. This is about Canadian democracy. This is about upholding the institutions that we have. And Mr. Cooper just wants to take more and more pot shots at the Prime Minister over this because he sees political opportunity of this. You know, Mr. Cooper just moments ago, when talking about this, talked about a private member's bill.
Point of order, Chair.
Oh, am I
Mr. Garrettson,
skin a little bit there?
No. Sorry, Mr. Colleagues, we had a really good 95 minutes or so. Or
I know, I sat through it all.
And we are...
interrupting you.
Guys, I have a point of order for Mr. Jennis. I'm going to give him the floor to speak to that point of order. Following that, I'm going to return... Mark, Mr. Garrettson, please. Thank you. I'm going to afford Mr. Jennis the opportunity for his point of order. I'll go back to Mr. Garrettson. Colleagues, I hope we can be productive in the next number of minutes. So, Mr. Jennis, the floor is yours.
At risk of violating Napoleon's most famous advice, I will just point out that my colleague is far afield of the topic of the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Jennis, for your observation. Mr. Garrettson?
So, Mr. Cooper, in his comments, which I found to be wildly ironic, just moments ago, started to talk about a private member's bill introduced by Mr. Ruff. Mr. Ruff is a Conservative colleague of ours who sits in the House of Commons and actually is only one of a small handful of parliamentarians that sit on the NSICOP committee. Mr. Ruff is Mr. Cooper, Mr. Jennis, Mr. Duncan, and Mr. Berthold's connection to security.
Monsieur le Président, j'aurais eu un...
Chair, I've got a point of order, please.
Mr. Garrettson, we have a point of order. Madame Gill, à vous.
Over to you, Madam Gill. Simply, well, as I'm stepping in for Madame Goudreau, if you can hear me, I've stepped in to replace Madame Goudreau, and I wanted to check that you've seen that my hand was raised before the intervention and the point of order from Mr. Jennis. So I would like to follow on after Mr. Garrettson, but of course, quite politely, I'd like to let him finish his intervention. But I just wanted to make sure that you'd seen that I'd raised my hand to speak briefly as well. Yes, I very much appreciate your comments, and I'll add your name to the list. Thank you.
The floor remains yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I was saying, Mr. Ruff, and I'm speaking directly to the comments of the Conservative member who introduced this motion, who referenced his private member's bill. Mr. Ruff is one of only a small handful of parliamentarians that sit on NSICOP. And for those that might just randomly be tuning into this, NSICOP is the secret committee of parliamentarians that reviews sensitive information, that has all the security clearances to do that. Mr. Ruff does not support the narrative of these conservative colleagues sitting here, despite the fact that Mr. Cooper invoked his name moments ago. As a matter of fact, this is what Mr. Ruff said just a few days ago on June the 10th. He said, every single parliamentarian, in fact, I would encourage every single Canadian, read the report from start to finish. The fact is that an issue that needs to be resolved, referring to foreign interference, and this is the important part, Mr. Chair. You want to tone down the partisanship and up your game on national security intelligence. We all need to do a better job of educating ourselves on what the threats are, what the vulnerabilities are, and how to deal with them going forward. Mr. Ruff also said, he said, quote, to build on what Mr. McGuinty said, I am 100% in agreement. I notice my Conservative colleagues are chatting with each other, which doesn't surprise me because that's what they did during the time that the witnesses were speaking, because they have no interest in hearing this. But at least for having it on the record, I just want to reiterate this point. He said, and I am 100% in agreement. The Prime Minister is not redacting anything. It's the process that we go through that allows those redactions to occur to protect national security, national defense, and mainly international relationships. Mr. Ruff, who is on NSICOP, who is a Conservative member of Parliament, is chastising these four individuals for the way that they're acting today. Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn the debate.
Okay, colleagues.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order. Is this member trying to shut down debate when others haven't even been able to reply because he doesn't want to have to work this summer? Is that what's happening, Chair?
Mr. Jenness. I think I have your name right. We have a motion that has been
Garrison
put
just
forward,
say boo-hoo, get over it
and
again?
we have, guys, do I have to suspend? Or can I just get to the order of business here? I'm not tending to the point of order because we have had a motion to adjourn. You know very well that that is what we call a dilatory motion. We're going to go to a vote. Mr. Clerk, I'm going to ask you to call the vote to adjourn debate on the motion that was moved, what seems like ages ago now, by Mr. Cooper. Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Romanato.
Oui.
Madame Fortier.
Oui.
Mr. Duguid.
Yes.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Oui.
Mr. Gerritsen. Yes. Mr. Cooper.
No.
Mr. Jenness.
No.
Mr. Duncan.
Nope.
Mr. Berthold.
No.
Madame Gill.
Oui.
Ms. Matheson. 7 yeas, 4 nays.
There we go. Okay, colleagues, you've heard the results. We have adjourned debate on the motion. We are now going to resume the line of questioning that we were engaged in prior to the moving of Mr. Cooper's motion. Mr. Gerritsen, the floor is yours for 5 minutes, should you want your time.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritsen. Madame Gill, il y avait
Madame Gill, there was another 30 seconds that I had given to Madame Goudreau, so if you want, you have 3 minutes, but if you don't, you have 2 minutes 30. I'll simply put a question to you and we'll see. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'd like to apologize to the witnesses in front of us. There we were talking about business committee. We could have done that later, so my excuses. Now, I've got a question to put to Madame Xavier about those who were victims of the ATP 31 attack. Last week, we were told that neither CSIS nor the CSE or the RCMP had contacted MPs. Following on from those incidents or disclosure in the press, and the only briefing given to the MPs came from the FBI. Now, that it's enormous. It's really not normal. Do you think this is abnormal, not normal? And what about this lack of communication with MPs? Is that part of your protocol or non-protocol, rather? So could you perhaps field this two-pronged question? Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a pity, in fact, that the MPs concerned were not contacted, because we thought that by providing information in 2021 to the House of Commons that the necessary steps would be taken to inform you. Having said that, we are taking necessary steps to inform our colleagues within the agencies and also in the House to improve the processes. And I said earlier, we've had several conversations already with our colleagues to improve things and make sure that you're better served. I'd like to add something. No, I'm trying to see if I've got enough time so I can put another question afterwards. And then perhaps you could also send these in writing, because of course I don't have much time. I was also surprised to learn, Madame Xavier and Madame Drouin, perhaps you can both field this next question, but I've been an MP since 2015, and we've been told that, in fact, there's a centre against cyber attacks that could support MPs when this type of attack arises. But now, that was back in 2015. We're in 2024, so 9-10 years as an MP, and I've never known that this type of centre existed. So why have I never even been told? Why have we not been informed about the type of support that could be available to us when this type of attack occurs? Thank you very much for that question. I'd like to add that before the 2019 election, there were already services that were offered, in particular during the general election period during 2019. Because of everything we'd learned from other elections around the world, we wanted to make sure that candidates in particular who were going to be nominated and become future MPs. Well, my question was to know why we were not told about this. It's great to know that it exists, but in fact, we didn't know it existed. And if we don't know it exists, how could it help us? So that was my question. Why were we not told about this? Who should have told us about this? And how should they have told us about this? Because I've been here for nearly 10 years and I've just learned about this very recently. Thank you, Madame Gill. I've applied the 30 seconds extra that are given to Madame Gaudreau, but Madame Xavier, if you want to quickly respond. Response. Well, back then, we had shared that information with all of the caucuses and all the election officers so that they could share that with the members. Of course, we can continue to improve communication with everyone to make sure that the correct services for support can be offered.
Minutes, 30 seconds. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry. Okay, great. Thank you. And I do want to thank the witnesses as well for appearing. And I will apologize in advance. While your time is very valuable, I do want to make sure that I'm able to move a motion that I've had on notice for quite some time. So with my time left standing, I would like to move the following motion that I gave notice of previously. And that may require a bit of changes due to timing. However, given the recent findings of the NSCOP Special Report on Foreign Interference in Canada's democratic processes and institutions, the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs ordered the production of all relevant memoranda, briefing notes, emails, records of conversations, and any other relevant documents from departments and agencies, including the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and Communications Security Establishment Canada, concerning interactions with Conservative Party of Canada officials and representatives on the topic of foreign interference and its impact on the outcome of the 2020-2022 leadership races, provided that, 1, both agencies tasked with gathering these documents apply redactions according to the Access of Information and Privacy Act. 2, these redacted documents be deposited as soon as possible, but not later than Sunday, June 25th, with the clerk of the committee to be distributed to all members of the committee in both official languages. And if I may speak to my motion. Okay, I may speak to my motion. So I recognize I had put forward this motion earlier on June 11th, and so I recognize that there may be a willingness to change the point 2 in terms of the date to provide authorities with more time on providing and the provision of the documents requested. But I think that it's extremely important, considering we've all sat around this table, we've all talked about how incredibly important foreign interference is in terms of how it impacts not only this institution, but those who come into this institution, those who us as leaders, but are the leaders that we work with in all the given parties. I think that it's important as part of that uncovery and that investigation, and I know that I'm sure my Conservative colleagues will agree, considering their passion on this issue in terms of foreign interference and wanting to get to the bottom of it, that they too, despite their leaders' unwillingness to get the briefing and the security clearance, which I think is a mistake, but what have you, that they would want to get to the bottom of this. And in all the conversations that we've had, they've been very clear about how intent they are to get at the bottom of this. So I think that it's fair, considering my concerns around the NSICOP report, and that we move forward. And I would also like to note that we were very clear that we abide by privacy legislation, that we ensure that the appropriate redactions are applied to respect that privacy. But I think that it's important to go through this and pass this motion as I've put it forward.
Okay, colleagues, so a couple of things. The first is I'm going to let the witnesses go if I have the blessing of the committee, because we have exhausted the amount of time we have set forward for that, and they have provided their services. I'm not sure we need them here for the business that we're about to undertake. So I'm looking around. I think I have consent. Madame Xavier, Madame Drouin, thank you very much for being with us. We wish you a good summer, and we'll look forward to reconnecting at some point in the future. Colleagues, just give me 1 minute. I just need to check in with the clerk on something, okay? Okay, colleagues, so here's where we're at. Ms. Matheson has moved her motion. We have to deal with that motion. However, and I've asked for additional resources in order for us to be able to deal with that motion. However, the current resources that were provided to us have now run out. So I need to suspend briefly in order for the clerk and the staff here to turn over the resources, at which point we will resume. And the speaking list to address Ms. Matheson's motion as it currently stands is Mr. Cooper. If there are other members, of course, let me know. So I'm going to suspend, let the resources turn over. We will resume debate on the motion with Mr. Cooper being the first speaker. additional resources. I'm going to suspend the meeting, and that will alleviate the challenges that we're facing right now. Okay. Sorry?
Just clarify, you're suspending until when and on what basis?
I'm suspending on the basis that...
No, sorry. But for how long?
I mean, that has to be worked out.
Okay. So
I'm going to...
We're not talking for an hour. We're talking...
Well, we're going to see where that's going to go, but that's where we're at. Okay, so colleagues, the meeting is suspended.